United States of America is shockingly a bunch of states that are united in America and Oceania. But there's more to the picture than just states. So today, I'm going to tell you the full layout of America. This is a map of the USA. Let's start with the basics. The USA is made up of states. Wow, how surprising. Now these states have different categories. The lower 48, also known as the contiguous states, make up the states that border each other directly. Meanwhile, we have the continental states, states that are in North America, leaving poor Hawaii all alone, not in a group. Within states, we have counties, and also Native American lands. These Native American reservations actually overlap with the states. These are areas in which the Native Americans rule. They basically control the land, and they accept that the USA manages its external affairs, I guess. But they're still technically part of the state, even though they don't necessarily need to follow all of the laws. Look, it's a ton of asterisks, so we don't even need to talk about them right now. Honestly, they deserve a separate video. I actually made a flag video about that, so I'll link it in the description. But counties themselves have more subdivisions, and they actually vary between counties. But that is so tiring, so I will not talk about it. Moving on. So if you thought that was confusing, you haven't seen anything yet, because once again, those are just the states. Now, about other stuff. Another thing the US has are districts. Currently, there's only one, although there used to be more. And this district is called the District of Columbia. You may recognize it because it's the DC in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. The districts are basically federal land. They are directly controlled by the USA, and that kind of makes sense for Washington, D.C., considering it is literally the capital. But also, it is controlled by all 50 states in the House of Representatives. So basically, if Washington, D.C. wants to do something as a district, then they can just veto it, which is kind of awkward considering it has a greater population than Wyoming and Vermont. Yeah, I know. But moving on. Now, next, you're gonna see some really terrifying stuff. And if I map it all out on a map, it's gonna get really sad. So I'm just gonna color this map blue. Anyway. Those are the territory. Alright, so most of these territories do not have flags, but it doesn't matter because nobody lives there. Mostly. Anyway, these territories are grouped up differently. These are the Commonwealths. They are basically self-governing, but they cannot have external, affairs? The USA basically does everything for them. And, they're basically self-sustaining. They also have their own constitution, like almost most of these territories. Never mind. Moving on. Oh yeah, by the way, Have you ever wondered why everybody considers Puerto Rico independent? That's because it kinda is, because it's a commonwealth. Once again, moving on. Now, these 4 on the right are organized territories. That means they, according to the USA, have an organized government, according to the federal government. I'm saying that because you're going to need to know that later on. Then this other part is the unorganized territories. According to the federal government, they are not organized. Now, for the organized territories, they basically function kind of independently. Well, not independent like the Commonwealth, but like autonomous. Except, yeah, they have a local government. They have a local government to do stuff, which is different from the Commonwealth, where their government does their own things. However, the local government just helps do the American job. But the only thing is, just like the District of Columbia, the House of Representatives can just do whatever it wants. Puerto Rico has a larger population than 21 US states, yet it still can't do anything. The unorganized territories, on the other hand, are either federal land or not federal land and instead privately owned. Most of the privately owned ones are nature reserves. Now, most of these are in the category of unincorporated. This means that they are not subject to the US Constitution. Now, what does not subject to the US Constitution even mean for us? Well, it means that basically most of these people are citizens, most. If they, like for example, Puerto Ricans, if you're born there, you're a US citizen, congratulations. You can even go into the States, however you can't vote. You can only vote in the States. But don't feel bad, at least you're not American Samoa, who are not even US citizens and are American nationals and can't even vote ever. Yeah. They do have a passport though. Technically, these are the only places where you cannot vote. Why? Because technically, US citizens living abroad can vote. So, you can literally live in the Siberian depths of Russia and vote, but you can't vote in Puerto Rico. But moving on. About American Samoa. American Samoa is a weird thing in general. It's, according to the federal government, yeah, you know why I did it now, it's unorganized. However, it is inhabited, and it has its own de facto local government and local constitution as if it was organized. However, the federal people just haven't gotten to doing anything, because why would they do anything? They have to worry about more stuff, like the war on anyway. So other than those, we have le incorporated territory. Anyway, the incorporated territories only number 1 right now. That one being unincorporated. This territory is the Palmyra Atoll. The Palmyra Atoll is incorporated, meaning it fully follows the US Constitution. So technically, if you are born in either the US federal land or the private nature reserve on Palmyra Atoll somehow, and don't die to the nature or getting caught by federal agents wondering why you are on their land, then you are a US citizen. Also, this is awkward because you can vote here, but you can't vote in Puerto Rico. Moving on. And this is, once again, unorganized, so... But it's not like American Samoa, it's actually unorganized. Yeah. Now, what about organized incorporated? Well, that doesn't exist. Why would it exist? That's stupid. Actually, it used to exist. The last territory to hold this was Hawaii, because it's basically the first thing you need to do if you want to become a state. Now, this is where we can find why Palmyra Atoll is in this category. One, it's kind of stupid, considering no one lives there permanently. Not the nature guy. You know what? Never mind. Talking about American Palmyra, we go back to Hawaii, right before it becomes a state. Palmyra Atoll was actually part of Hawaii, the territory. However, when Hawaii became a state, this left the Palmyra Atoll away. It didn't join Hawaii as a state and was removed. This made it incorporated still, yet technically it had no local government, meaning now it was unorganized. So if you ever wonder why this tiny island is a place you can vote on instead of Puerto Rico, it's Hawaii's fault. Well, it's true. So now this still isn't the end, which is annoying. But there are only 4 things left, and out of that only 2 categories, so I guess that's okay, right? Anyway, the first thing we have is Guantanamo Bay, which is weird because according to the USA, it isn't American territory. It's just a military base which they pay rent. You'll see why I'm saying it in that voice later on. For in Cuba. However, de facto, it is American territory. Anyway, the way this works was basically when Cuba got independent, due to being an ally of the USA got a nice, neat military base there. But, you see, when Fidel Castro took over, something sad happened. You see, they didn't really like American bases on a communist area. So what do you think happened? Naturally, you're just going to avoid the rent and not do a single thing about the fact that there is American soil and an American border right next to you. The Americans only gave rent money to the Cubans once, and what Fidel Castro called a misunderstanding. But since the USA no longer pays rent for it, technically Guantanamo Bay is a US military occupied district, meaning it is American soil. Now, talking about the last category, we have the Marshall Islands, Palau, and Micronesia. As freely associated states, these are actually not part of the USA and are sovereign countries with their own government and their own representatives at the UN. The only thing is that they rely on the USA for aid. Basically, the USA used to have these people as a trust mandate, and they didn't really want to let go of this strategic position, so they just turned the Northern Mariana Islands into a commonwealth along with Puerto Rico, and turned these three countries into independent countries. Yay! However, the only twist was that the USA gets to put military bases there, and in return, the Marshall Islands, Palau, and Micronesia get to go to the USA and indefinitely go to school there if they want, and also work, and vice versa for the USA. They also get military protection from the USA and also economic aid. So these are basically the only areas where you can go to the USA without a visa indefinitely, like even more for 6 months and more. Yeah, I'm trying to cut Canada out of picture. And minus those three we just talked about, that is the basics of the United States of America. If you liked this video, then make sure to subscribe. Yay! I actually made a video about the UK in a similar format because it also has very weird divisions, but also external divisions, because technically its government is also the government of other countries like Canada. But if you want to see that, I'll link that in the description, or maybe I'll put it in that weird corner with the eye. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos, once again, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Wait, what if I end the video in the middle of this sentence? Like, what if I say something and